Why are you doing that in Excel? Why don't you just use Python? Stick around and find out. You just gotta analyze stuff. What is up, guys? Matt Brattin here with TMBanalytics.com, your analytics career headquarters, back with another video. And this one has been a long time coming because every time that I share some Excel tips, tricks, or projects, either right here on YouTube or on LinkedIn or even out in Reddit land, I always get questions that start with, why don't you just fill in the blank? And it usually ends with use Python or use XYZ tool. Right, it's typically a gross oversimplification of whatever task is being performed, but I'm here today to put my tool agnostic approach on the line, and I've got a treat for you all in this one. So here's the deal. If you haven't already checked out my Excel for Analytics project series, thing number one, I highly encourage you to do that. But thing number two, please note, it is not a prerequisite to what we are doing here in this video. Rather, here's what's going to happen. First, I'm going to quickly introduce you to the data cleaning exercise that we are about to go through. And if you want to follow along, there's going to be a link in the description below where you can download that source file. From there, I'm going to hand things over to my friend and fellow analytics professional and YouTuber, Bradon Valgardson from the channel Chart Explorers. And he's going to show you how he has chosen to work through the data cleaning exercise using Python. Once he's done, then we're going to jump back over to me, where I'm going to show you another approach to clean the data in Excel, this time using PowerQuery so that our process becomes programmed for easy refreshing. Finally, Bradon and I are going to come together for a very friendly debate on the merits of each of the different tools, complete with scorecards rating each of them in the ease of the build or the setup, the auditability of the process, the repeatability of the process, and finally, the accessibility of our work for the stakeholders. So definitely want to stick around for that. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and quickly walk us through the exercise, the cleaning exercise, before handing it over to Bradon. So let's jump back into that source file right over here, guys, and get a quick refresher on that. All right, so here's the file. If you haven't downloaded this yet, I highly recommend you do so, just so that in the event you do want to follow along, you've got it right there. So what's the question? The question, let's just read this email. So this source file has 3 tabs. The first one's an email. It's supposed to be from our manager, who is generally unhelpful, right? This guy says, hey, the board's asking to see how volume looked in Q2. I got some data attached, that's the 2 other tabs, but didn't have a chance to pull anything together and was hoping that you could take a stab at it. You take a stab at it. I think they just want to see Q2 2021 volume by region and wanted to know if everything was looking good. I think this file has what you need. I don't remember all the region codes. I know that NAM ends in 1, EMEA ends in 3, and APAC and LATAM are 2 and 4, but I don't remember which is which. I do know that LATAM has the lowest volume, so go ahead and assign that to whichever comes out lowest. I appreciate your help. A little ambiguous, right? That's the intention. The intent here was to create a question that's kind of realistic in that it's a little ambiguous, a little open-ended. Somebody's short on time, they just kind of kick you over what they think you need, and then your job is to go through it and answer this question. So in the Excel for Analytics project series, it's actually a 4-part series that starts with the introduction to the problem. It goes through data cleaning, data exploration and analysis, and then ultimately presentation. For our purposes here, we're focusing on that data cleaning aspect, okay? And you're going to see why here in just a second. So this is the data that was provided. You've got this EXT tab. Well, this is what it looks like, okay? It's got a CL ID, which is client ID. That's a field, date, and volume. Just 3 columns. It goes down to row 908. And if you look here, you see that there's a bunch of blanks, right? So the reason for this is there's systems out there that will export data in sort of a tabular form, meaning it doesn't repeat headers. It just has like, hey, for client 11420, we have all these entries. And then when you get down to the next client, it names the client and then it goes down. So this needs to be filled down. That's a cleaning request. We need to do that. We need to fill down all of these guys. Number 2, notice this date looks wonky. I'm going to tell you right now, it's text. It's stored as text. You can't do a whole lot with a date that's stored as text. Go ahead and fix that. That's part of the cleaning exercise. Volume, same thing. This is also stored as text. If you look, you highlight this, it only gives you a count down there at the bottom. It's not summing anything because it's text, it's not a number. So we need to convert that to numbers, okay? All of this should be converted to an actual data table for further manipulation. So that's thing number one. Thing number two, control page down. Here is our sheet 3, and this is our geo IDs, right? If you look, we've got 53 client IDs. I'm gonna cut to the chase and say these are all unique. Every client ID is unique, but this is presumably coming out of a different system, right? So this different system it's got our geo data in it, and it assigns a geo ID to each of the different unique client IDs. Now, so if there's 53 of these, control page up on this tab, you can see if we go control shift end, shift over, count 53, that means that we have every one of our client IDs is represented here, and then we need to basically fill this down, bring over the geo ID, do some summing of the volume after we've fixed it to see who has the lowest volume, label the lowest one to LATAM, and then fill in the rest. We know that the one that ends in 1 is NAM, the one that ends in 3 is APAC. Was it APAC or EMEA? Whatever the email said. Yeah, so it was EMEA, ends in 3. So that's the gist of it. That's what we need to do. So we need to turn this into a table. We need to kill this leading C dash. You see, that's another thing. It comes out of a different system. It's stored differently, right? We need to kill that leading number. And then we need to be able to index off of that to look up and tie back the region code, do some summing, assign a common name to it, and then we should be ready to rock and roll on our analysis. So that is, in essence, the exercise that we are going to be going through as we're cleaning here, okay? And that's what it's going to look like. So from here, I'm going to go ahead and kick it over to Bradon, who is going to walk through this cleaning process using Python and a Jupyter notebook. And then when he's done, it's going to come back over here to me, where I'm going to pick things up and do the whole process using PowerQuery. And finally, we're all going to come together and discuss our results. So stick around, and here comes Bradon.
We just got an email with some data and asking us to look at quarter 2 with some region codes that are a little bit of a puzzle to figure out which region is which region. So let's go and look into our data and see what we can figure out. In the email, we were sent over an Excel file. It has 3 sheets. The first is the email, just for our convenience. The second sheet contains information with client ID, date, and volume. And the third sheet, it looks like it has the client IDs with their geo ID. So nothing too crazy there. Let's move over into Jupyter Notebook, where we can use Python to interact with this data. To start off, I like to usually create a markup cell where I can add notes for myself at the very top of the notebook. So we'll call this notes. And we'll just leave it like that for now. And I always import pandas as PD and numpy as NP. We'll run that. And then what we want to do is create our data frames. So this first data frame, we'll call it df, and to read in the Excel file, PD read Excel, and the name of the file. I can press tab to autocomplete because this Jupyter Notebook is in the same folder as the Excel file. We want to read the sheet name is ext00701220221. Long sheet name, but we got it. Next, we'll read in the sheet with the geo IDs. So we'll call that geo pd.read excel. Same file name. Sheet name is equal to sheet 3. Okay, let's read that in. And now what we're going to do is explore our data a little bit. Okay, so start off df.head. Looks pretty good. Sometimes instead of df.head, I like to just run the df, and it gives us a little more information. 907 rows, 3 columns. Awesome. So it looks like client ID actually has a bunch of missing values here. That's just because client ID isn't filled down here, so we can actually use something called fill forward to fill that in. And we have our dates and volume. If we notice, dates is formatted not as a typical Pandas date, so we'll probably need to change that. We'll look at that in just a second. So let's add that to our notes. We're gonna have to fill in client ID in df. And then let's see, I like to look at the data types here. So we see client ID is an object, so is date, and volume is int64. So volume is good, but the date needs to be changed into a date time object. We'll want to add that to our notes. And let's finally do df.describe. This will describe our volume column, or the integers or float columns. If we were more familiar with this data or the business, this might make a little more sense to us, because I don't know exactly what the volume is referring to. I'm not sure if these numbers seem legitimate, but they seem to all conform. There's no big outliers or anything like that. So we should be good. All right, let's look at our geo. We could say geo.head or just run geo. This is the entire data frame here. So actually, let's just go with head. Cool, cool. That looks pretty good. One thing I'm noticing is that it has a C dash for client ID, whereas up here in our other DF, it didn't have that C dash. So let's say we're going to want to get rid of the C dash in GeoDF for client ID. And let's look at the data types. Those are objects, that makes sense. They're strings here. And geo.describe. There are 53 client IDs, 53 geo IDs. The client IDs are all unique. That's probably a good thing. And the geo IDs, there's 4 of them. That makes sense because in the email it said we had 4 different regions. All right, so let's get down to business and start cleaning. So first, let's fill in our client ID in our data frame. We can accomplish this by using fill forward in the fill NA method. NA in Pandas refers to missing data. So we're going to start off with our client ID column. Fill NA method is equal to ffill, or fill forward, actually forward fill, and then we'll do that in place. What that means is we want our changes to be made permanent. And up here, let's make a little note for ourselves saying we're filling in missing client IDs. Cool. Actually, let's run that and see what we get. So we can look at our data frame, and it appears that that has been filled in. Let's actually take a different view here. We'll look at the first 15 rows. So client 11420, and we'll need to look at a few more rows. 25. Cool. Up to index row 16. Let's look over here with our Excel file and make sure that filled in correctly. So we have client 11420 all the way to row 18. So remember, what we want to do is -1 because it's 0 indexed in Pandas. It starts at 0 rather than at 1. And then we want it -1 other one because we have the headers here taking up a row. Whereas in Pandas, they're not taking up that row. So 16 is our number. Looks good. Let's keep all this cleaning in a single cell. That way it's all organized and ready to go for us. What we're going to want to do next is actually work with that date. Since it's being interpreted as a string, we want it to actually be interpreted as a date time object. Convert dates. We can do that using the toDateTime method. So df date, set that equal to pd.toDateTime, and pass in the column that we want to convert, the date column in our data frame. So it's as easy as that. Let's run this cell again, and we'll look at our data frame and see how the date format has changed. It's now year-month-day rather than the month/day/year like we had above right here. So this is the typical formatting for pandas when it knows it's a date. So that looks good. What might be helpful actually is if we can break these dates down by quarter. And since we have multiple years, I'm going to actually create a column for the year, for the quarter, and then combine those two so that we can get a year-quarter column. We can do that. Let's say df, we're going to create a new column, year, and set that equal to df date.dt, saying we're using the date column as a date.year. So that should grab the year from our date column and assign that into the year column. What's really nice with pandas is to get the quarter, all we have to do is df quarter, create that new column. We can name it whatever we want. df date.dt.quarter. So let's run this cell and then look what our data frame looks like. Make sure everything's working the way we expect. Okay, now we have our year column and our quarter column. And everything looks the way we would expect. Since we weren't able to check this above when we were exploring our data, let's do it now. We're going to check out the date range now that it's actually functioning as a date. I'm actually going to put this back up here just so all our exploration is in the same location, even though we're doing it out of order. So df date, and let's look at the minimum. So the first date in our data frame, or the oldest date, is 2020, January 31st. So this is something important that we'll want to remember, is that all of January is excluded from the 2020 data, except for the very last day. If we make any comparisons, what we're going to want to do is either not include Q1 from 2020, which is probably okay since they just want to know about Q2, or we're going to have to make a note saying Q1 looks like it's lower, but it's missing an entire month or a third of the data from Q1. And then let's look at our max. And it looks like we have all the way up to June 30th, 2021, which is good. That gets us all the way through the end of Q2 in 2021. So let's move back down here to our data cleaning. And as I said before, we're going to combine the year and the quarter columns together to get a year-quarter column. So we'll call that year-quarter. And that is going to be equal to df year, but we want to treat this as a string, and then we're going to concatenate to it an underscore, and then df quarter as type string. So this will combine the year and the quarter with an underscore between it. So let's run that and look at what we get. 2020 quarter 1, 2020, quarter 2, and so forth. Looks good. We're moving in the right direction. Alright, so we'll get rid of all those extra rows. We'll leave this here for our reference. And what we're going to do is start cleaning the geocoded data. First off, let's get rid of that C dash in the geo data. We can do that pretty simply. We'll say geo CLID, make sure that's in quotations, is equal to geo CLID dot str dot replace. str is just using a string method, and what we want to replace is the C dash, and what we want to replace it with is nothing. So we'll leave a blank quotation there. So let's run that and then look at our geo data, actually just the head. And we have the C dashes are removed from the client ID. This is important, so now we can match client IDs here in our geo data with the client IDs here in our data frame. So then we can match that with the geocodes here and eventually match the geocodes with the region codes. So what we're going to do is create a dictionary and then map that dictionary to client IDs in the data frame. If you're not familiar with the Python dictionary or mapping, this might sound a little confusing, but it's fairly straightforward. What we're doing is creating a reference or a dictionary so that each client ID is matched with the appropriate geo ID. And we'll do that here since they're matched. And then what we do is use a map to say, look up client ID 11420 in the dictionary that we made and then match it with the geo ID that we have. So first off, I don't want to modify our original data frame, but we can use it to create our dictionary easily. So we'll call geodict. We're creating this new data frame based off of our original data frame geo. And the reason why we add this copy is so we don't get a set copy warning. Now what we want to do is set the index of geodict to our client ID. So the index of geodict is equal to geo client ID. For the final step, we will say geodict is equal to geodict geoid dot to dict. Let's run that. Fingers crossed. Hope we get everything we're expecting. So let's check out geodict. And we get a dictionary. That's good news. And it looks like the client IDs are matched up with their geo IDs. That's exactly what we wanted. All right. Now what we want to do is get rid of that. Get the geo ID into the DF. Perfect. Okay. So now that we have a dictionary, we can map that dictionary to the client IDs in our data frame to create a geo ID in our data frame. So we simply just say geo ID column is going to be equal to the client ID in our data frame as mapped to the dictionary. And let's take a look at that. Make sure everything looks good. So it looks like everything matched up appropriately. Let's actually just go back to our Excel file. We'll look up 11420 geo 1004. Awesome. And we can do one last check, make sure that we have all of our region geo ID codes. Let's just do a value count. And cool. So it looks like there's 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now what we're going to want to do is match our GeoIDs with region code. So that's this little bit of information. We want these GeoIDs to match up with these region codes here. So first off, the information that we have is based on Q2 volume. So we're going to want to filter our data frame just to include Q2. So Q2 is equal to df, where our df column year quarter is equal to 2021 2. So if we run that and look at it, we should only have, yep, the year 2021 and Q2. Now what we want to know is how much volume by GeoID. We can do that using a group by. So we'll call that Q2 vol. Set that equal to q2.group by, and we're going to group by GeoID. And what we want is the sum of the vol column, or volume column. Let's take a look at that. And what is returned is the volume for each of those GeoIDs. Now what we can do is refer back to the email and see which one matches with which. So nam ends in 1, so GeoID, let's actually create a new dictionary with these values here. So Geo1 we know is associated with nam. Okay, and then next, the EMEA, I don't know how to say that, EMA, ends in 3. So let's put in Geo number 3. We'll leave a space for number 2 because we know we want to fill that in. And that's EMEA. Then we have Geo 4 and Geo 2. All right, we have to figure out which one is 2 and 4. The person corresponding with us didn't remember, but they did know that LATAM, LATAM, I'll just call it LAT, had the lowest volume. So if we check over here, the lowest volume was 0.4. So we know this can be LAT. And then finally, that means that APAC is number 2. We're going to use this dictionary to map to the GeoIDs in our data frame, just like we used the dictionary of client IDs and GeoIDs to map to the client IDs in our data frame. That was a mouthful, but it's not as complicated when we write it all out. So all we have to do is say df region is equal to df GeoID and map our region dictionary. Oh, yep, and we need to say region dict is equal to the dictionary values, not just leave it blank. I'm running into all sorts of problems. Let's add a comma there. I also like to add an ending comma. It doesn't matter if we have this last comma or not, but it's good just in case we ever wanted to add another GeoID. There we go, got through those errors. And it looks like everything matched up. So 04 is LAT, yep. 02 is APAC, yep. We can't see the other ones, but I'm sure those are good as well. All right, now we have a cleaned and ready to go data frame. Obviously, this isn't going to help our employer or whoever is the stakeholder here asking us to look at the information. We'll want to investigate it further. Matt has some really good information on his channel. He has a whole series on this. If you're interested in the actual analysis part with Python, let Matt know and perhaps we'll do another collaboration. Thanks for watching.
Well, that was cool. Good job, Bradon. I really enjoyed watching you work through that. And just so that everybody knows, behind the scenes, he and I, we had a lot of conversations, a lot of fun talking about this stuff. So I think what he did was super cool, but now it's time for Excel. All right, we're gonna do this in PowerQuery now. And just so that you know, PowerQuery is, there's actually code that goes on behind the scenes that if you know the language, you could just directly code in your commands and what it is that you're trying to achieve. That's called M code. That's the language. We are not going to be doing that. We are going to be going through the interface or the GUI to effectively execute all of our PowerQuery commands, all that good stuff. So I'm not going to be coding in M. You will see some of the code. I will show some of that, especially when we're going in and dropping some of our notes. But just be aware, if you were hoping to see some M coding live in living color, not going to happen. Not in this video anyway, okay? So for our purposes, this is going to be super approachable, and let's just go ahead and jump right in. All right, so here's that file everybody knows and loves, right? It's got the raw data here and here. Where I'm going to start is File, New, Blank Workbook. This is a blank workbook. Look at that, okay? I'm going to go immediately File, Save As. Going to drop it in here, and we're going to call this Excel for Analytics Data Clean with PQ or QP, PQ. V1 just for the heck of it, save. All right. Sheet 1, I don't really care about that just yet because when you start to create queries in PowerQuery, what it's going to do is create its own tables, names, and all that stuff, and throw it into tabs and all that jazz. So I'm not going to mess with the tabs just yet, but I want to show you how easy this is. So first thing you do is you go to Data, and you've got this like queries, connections, get, transform, data, all that jazz. I'm going to go here to Get Data, drop down from File, from Workbook. You can see there's all these options, right? You can go from a database, you can go from Azure, from online services. I use this all the time from Salesforce objects and reports, super handy. And then other sources, there's all sorts of things that you can do. ODBC, there's some pretty cool connections that are out there built that you can use, and on and on and on. But for now, we're gonna go from File, from Workbook, hit that, and it's gonna drop me right here. And what I wanna grab is actually our source file. Grab this, import. And it is going to create a connection, and it's going to pop up with our navigator. So from here, you can choose which of the tabs or tables that you want to bring in. I want to actually grab multiple items. So I'm going to grab this guy and this guy. And I want to transform my data. So this is a habit. If you just click load or load to, you're just going to be loading whatever is out there. Usually a smart thing to start with transforming the data, just because you want to be able to have a little bit of control over what you're actually loading. Doesn't mean you can't change that. It's a good practice, I think. So first things first, it brings over the queries or the connections here using the default tab name. So first thing I'm going to do here is change this god awful thing. I'm going to call this volume underscore data. Okay. Enter. And then I'm going to go to sheet 3 and I'm going to call this region data. Cool. So we've already got those connections going. Now, if you look, it's got, this is our region table. For whatever reason, it brought in an extra column. That can happen if you've got some erroneous, maybe there was content in there at some point. I might have done something silly when I created the file. Doesn't matter, it's null, we can kill it. Volume data, and this is all the stuff that we've already seen. So what it does also by default when it brings things in is it tries to do what Excel does, which is try to be super smart. So it's going to try to recognize different types of things. It's going to automatically promote headers. So meaning, hey, your first row is right here. CLID, date. It just assumes that those are headers. And in this case, it assumed correctly. It doesn't always assume correctly, so you definitely want to check that out. But you see, it already has applied all these steps just by default, right? First step was, hey, here's the source. This is the file. These are all the different tabs and the different items that are tables in there. Then we're going to navigate to this particular tab. We're going to promote those headers. See, you can see here, it had that as the first row with blank columns, but by default, Excel said, I think those are column headers. So it did that automatically. And then also automatically, it detected the types of data here. So it changed types. You see volume changed to a number, date changed to a date, and CLID is just what it is, right? Excel did good. Excel did a good job here. It actually did the right things here. So, and you see up here, this is our M code. Every step, it's going to have a little command. And if you want to see all of these commands at once, you go to View, Advanced Editor, and this is basically all of the code that has been executed so far. So this is just saying that basically, and we can start taking notes all right away if you really wanted. We can go here, space down, up here to take a note. Real easy way is just // and then you start to write. So I'm going to say access source file. Boom. It goes down here and it says, hey, find this file on this path, and we want to grab this sheet here of data. And then we're going to do here, it says, hey, we're going to promote headers on this tab. That sounds good. We're going to go promote headers. If you want to take this kind of notes, you can. There, obviously, it's the syntax is pretty reasonable with M. There's orders and nuance that makes it a little bit funky. It's not as natural language as you might hope, but a lot of the commands are pretty straightforward. So promoted headers, change type. Maybe we don't actually need a note for something like that, but you can if you really wanted to. So that's that. I can just close that. If you ever wanted to grab that stuff, throw it in a notebook or a notepad and do your own coding and then throw it back in there, you can do that. That's certainly something you can do. So where were we? I think first you choose your own adventure at this point. So where do we want to start? I want to go ahead and fill down this client ID. So that's as simple as you just right click here, you hover over fill down. I mean, come on, how easy was that, right? So this right here, now we've got all of our data is filled in, all of our client IDs are filled in. That was super easy, okay? Our dates are updated, our volume's updated. Now we can jump back over here to our region data. Here, we want to get rid of that leading C dash, right? We've already established that that's not right. So I'm going to go here, right click, and I'm going to replace values. If I wanted to, you could do that right click, or you can come up here to like home, or is it transform, replace values. It's up to you. I like to right click a lot of these things. They're super quick. So replace values. And all I'm going to do is go find C dash, replace with nothing, blank, hit OK, and they're gone. You could do that through trim. And if you watched the Excel with Excel for Analytics, the project series that I did before, where we didn't use PowerQuery, I showed a couple of approaches to that, which were very similar to this, like grabbing left or right or whatever. So in this instance, we just replace text, and you can see here, that's the M code it produced. That's how this stuff works. It shows each step. If you need to kill a step, you just delete it here. If you want to like check out what you did, you hit the gear and it shows you what you got. PowerQuery is super cool. I want to kill this column because I don't like it. It shouldn't be there. So we go back to home and remove columns. Easy peasy. Cool. Now, because we've got our client ID good, our geo ID good, I'm going to go back to the volume data tab here, and I'm going to go ahead and add in our region ID, and I'm going to do that by merging queries. So I'm going to go ahead and merge queries, and what I want to do is say, hey, my volume data, I want to merge this column to our region data on this column. And then it gives you the type of join that you can do. So I want to do a left outer, and it gives you the layman's term. So all from the first, matching from the second. I think that makes sense. So let's do that. I don't need to use fuzzy matching. This says that the selection matches 907 out of 907 rows. That sounds like a good accuracy. Hit OK. And what it does is it brings over this guy with an expansion symbol that says, hey, we've just joined this table with that table. What do you want to do? You click on this guy. You say, hey, what do you want to bring over? I want to bring over just the GeoID. I already have the CLID. And then it says you want to use the original column name as the prefix. I'll show you what that looks like just by hitting OK. What it does is it says, hey, region data dot GeoID. If at any time you want to rename a column, double click, rename. I'm going to go GeoID. If I had gone ahead and not had that box checked, it would have come out like this. So choose your own adventure. Now we can do something cool. What is that, you ask? We're going to do a quick group by. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and go group by GeoID. I want to create a new column. We're going to call it volume. And the operation is going to be a sum of the volume column. Hit OK. Boom. Look at that. That's like a super quick pivot table where we're just doing a quick group. If you remember when we did this manually in Excel, what happened was we created a little table for our reference, and we did this so that we could identify who was our smallest region code so that we could apply the appropriate name. In this instance, so we know that GeoID 1, the one that ends in 1 is NAM. We know that the one that ends in 3 is EMEA. And then we can see from these numbers that this guy is the smallest, 425.262 versus 562.005. So that means that this is LATAM. So 1004 is LATAM. Now, we could have created a new query to do this so that we salvaged this. I'm just going to undo that because we've just determined what it was. I'm going to now add a new column, invoke custom conditional column. Let's do that. Conditional column. This new column is going to be common name, geo name. If GeoID equals value geo 1001, then I want it to say NAM. Add clause. If GeoID equals geo 1003, we know it's EMEA. Add clause. Look at how easy this is, guys. This is super easy. If GeoID equals, by the way, you can do all sorts of stuff like does not equal, begins with, does not, contains, all that stuff. Lots of cool things that you can do with conditional columns. Geo 1004, we just determined that is LATAM. And then finally add clause, GeoID equals geo 1002. This is going to be APAC. And again, we've determined that because we were told what NAM and EMEA were, and based on our quick grouping, we knew that the smallest region was 1004, which is LATAM, leaving 1002 to be APAC. If you have like an else here, like maybe this isn't all inclusive, but anything else you don't care about, you want it to be other, you could put it down here. In fact, I might just put something there because we're going to go look, because there should not be anything. I'm going to hit OK. And look at that. We got a new column. I'm going to hit this drop down, and we only have regions, which means there were no look, meaning everything got assigned. Beautiful. Here's a cool thing about PowerQuery too. I can delete this column now. Even though this conditional column uses the contents of this column in order to figure it out, I don't need it. I don't need this column. This order of operations here works. So I'm going to go back home, remove columns. Look at how clean this is. Now, if I wanted to do some rearranging, I could move the geo name over here. I don't think I need to do any of that. But basically, we've got our client ID, our date, our volume, our geo name. I mean, What's not to love? How easy is this? And if you want to see the code now, let's go back to View, Advanced Editor. Look at, I mean, it's not a lot. It's not a lot of stuff going on here. If we want to add some notes now, because if something doesn't make sense, maybe because here we, like for example, we merged queries, right? So we're going to go / merged geo table to volume table there. And then maybe down here, what did we do here? Nope. This is all pretty darn straightforward. Yeah, we can just say / removed geo ID because we already added geo name. Okay, again, you get the idea. You can add comments and all that stuff however it is that you see fit. And then once you're done, you hit done. We've got all that salvaged. And now what we do is come up here, go home, and I'm going to go ahead and close and load to. And now it says, hey, what do you want to do with this? I always check add to the data model just because. And then you could choose to only create a connection if you don't want to have a whole bunch of heavy tables showing up in your data, especially if you're doing something with like tons of rows. You know that that's not generally a good idea. So PowerQuery can handle millions of rows, by the way, guys. If you've got CSVs with tons of rows, you can put that bad boy to work. It is very efficient for crunching stuff like that and then creating groupings and doing things in the interface before you spit it back into Excel. So take advantage of that and create connections only, and you can do some larger scale data manipulation. But for right now, what I want to do, I don't want to just create a connection. I want the table here because that's what we ended up with in the cleaning exercise. I want to add it to the data model, and I'm going to go ahead and hit O. Well, because we already have the sheet, I'm going to go ahead and go existing worksheet. Oh no, it doesn't want me to do that. That's okay. Okay. And then now we got this module, queries and connections. It's loading them up. And kaboom. Look at that. We've got our region data. So this is our you click here and it's already named region data. Look at that, it's beautiful. Region data tab, volume data tab. It's already named. It is beautiful. It is a thing of beauty. And look at how easy that was, right? Look at how easy that was. And if you see something that you don't like, or if it doesn't come out the way that you think it should, go back and change it. Go back in. All you have to do is come over here, double click on this guy, and it'll pop back up. And once again, you can navigate between queries. You can jump right in. You can, like, if you wanted to be really rambunctious, you could like come in here and like delete a step, and it'll completely screw everything up. But so don't do that. I don't know why I just said that, but you could totally change all this stuff. You go, well, I actually think that when I did this conditional column, I wanted to do something different. You just change here, go make a tweak. Maybe you spelled LATAM wrong. I don't know. Super easy to undo. Then I'm just gonna cancel. I'm just gonna close this box. There you go. So that's pretty much it. And then this sheet 1, if we wanted, we could rename this to our summary, or it could be our art analysis. And then you can immediately start working on this stuff. So you're clicked in here, Alt-N-V, enter. We can immediately start running a pivot table on this, guys. Check this out. We go, oh, geo name. I want my volume by date. Blow this out to quarters. Let's go to our analyze. I want my pivot chart. We've looked at that. I want actually a line chart. I'm going to go OK, and then I'm going to switch rows and columns. Field items and sets design. Switch rows and columns. Boom. Does that look familiar? See how easy that was? Look at that. This might look familiar if you've watched the other video where when I started off the analysis process, we took a look here and came to see if, you know, hey, how are things looking? How are we trending? What's going on? And this is when we started asking the questions, and we're already there just based on what we had to do here. So again, you can see if I came in here and I wasn't narrating and I just had to bust something out, I could have done this incredibly fast. And the best part is you save this, and then let's say you get sent a new file with updated data. all you have to do is come in here, go to Data, Queries and Connections, refresh all. Watch this. It's going to start spinning wheel, loaded, waiting, boom, updated, done. If there was new data found, it would have been updated right now. It would have all been brought in, and you could just refresh that, refresh your pivot tables, and you are off to the races. And you can see the potential with this, where you could use all sorts of functions for like setting up how what your date parameters are, what's the current date, what's the current time period, how do you want things to be spaced. Lots of potential here for really cool stuff that is almost completely automated at this point. So there you have it. That's it. This is PowerQuery in a nutshell. And so you've so far seen how Bradon did this using Python. Now you've seen how I've done it using PowerQuery. Now we are going to come together and have a nice, friendly, spirited discussion around which of these two approaches is ultimately better. And you're going to see that right now. Mr. Chart Explorers, Bradon, how are you doing?
Good. Thanks for having me, Matt. How are you?
I'm doing all right. I'm glad to be here. I'm glad that you are here. And I'm really excited about this project. I think I had a lot of fun with this. I know you did too. We talked a lot about this before, during, and after. So what I wanted to do now was a really quick like recap on the whole process. So kind of get a sense for what you thought about like how realistic this project actually was, like in the world that you typically operate in. And then from there, let's jump into a little bit of our scoring parameters, where just as a reminder, we're going to talk about like the build or the setup, like the complexity and how it compares in Python versus Excel using PowerQuery. We're going to also talk a little bit about the auditability. So we're going to be awarding points to each of these categories, but the auditability of the work that you've done. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the repeatability. So how easily can you, once you've set this up, can you repeat what you've done? And then finally, the accessibility of what you've created ultimately, if you need to hand it off, share it with somebody, what do you do, and how easy is that to be done? So back a couple steps. How did you feel about this exercise? Was this like realistic at all for you?
Yeah, I liked it. As for realistic, I think definitely realistic. You kind of get everything thrown at you in the real world, right? This is definitely a beginner type of scenario, which was nice for me. You just kind of had the baby gloves on, right?
Yep.
But otherwise, yeah, like there are certain situations where you don't know what to expect, and so you go into the data and you're looking around and you're like, oh, this is interesting. There's the codes don't match up, or there's missing cells here, so let's fill that in. Oh, I don't know how to do that. Like, let's figure that out. And then
dirty data is life, right?
Yeah. And then also the semi-helpful boss that's like, I know this, but I don't know this. Like, can you just kind of figure that out?
Semi-helpful. That was a very, I think, a kind way of putting it. Generally unhelpful is what I would call it, but that's the Canadian version, right? We're trying to take a positive spin. All right. Well, good. Okay. So sounds like it was a realistic exercise for you. That was my intent. I wanted this to be somewhat grounded in reality, where you're going to get ambiguous questions. You're going to be dealing with messy data. The data is going to come from disparate sources. You never necessarily know how it's going to come out, and you got to deal with that in order to make progress or draw conclusions from anything. And the whole intent of our exercise here was to really focus on the cleaning aspect. So the initial part that was covered in the Excel for Analytics project series. So let's jump into the build. How did you find the build? I know you already walked through the process, but when you actually worked through it the first time, did you have any roadblocks, any hangups, anything that was difficult?
Yeah. So it was pretty straightforward. There were a couple of things with the client ID column in that first sheet. They weren't filled all the way down, and that's typical. I couldn't remember off the top of my head how to fill those in, so that took a little bit of time to look up and figure out how to do. But otherwise, it was fun actually looking back at it, because it was a little bit of a puzzle. It's like, okay, I have this bit of information, but I need to get all the way over here, but there's all these missing pieces. So it took a little bit of time to like, how do I get from point A to point D? What are these steps B and C that I have to accomplish to get to point D? So it was playing around a little bit, but otherwise, yeah, not too bad.
Okay. Yeah. And that's another ode to the generally unhelpful manager who gave you point D and point A, or maybe point D. It was a little bit unclear, but yeah. And you used, what was it? The forward fill function. That was the one you had to research. Okay. Yeah, that was cool. I really enjoyed watching you do all that stuff. So from the build itself, now, if we were to compare, because you've seen how I built this thing out in PowerQuery versus how you built it in Python, in general, how would you be inclined to say the build difficulty is for this particular problem in PowerQuery versus Python? Do you think it was actually an easier task done in Python versus PowerQuery, or vice versa?
This is where my bias is going to come out.
Good. Good. That's why you're here.
I think Python
Okay.
was easier. But that's what my experience is in. And the readability, like you can just kind of almost type the way that you're thinking in Python. So that makes it easy to write, easy to read, which I'm getting on to the steps ahead of. I'm getting ahead of
You're just ready to like clean the whole card for Python, aren't you? So yeah, no, and I think that I would also yeah, we'll get there. I'm not going to go there yet, but for me, again, I'm going to be biased towards Excel, because to me, I think of the accessibility. So anybody has access to Excel, and when you're dealing in the PowerQuery interface, you could literally go through the GUI and just click and choose and do stuff. You don't have to write any code. You don't have to know M code to be able to execute a Power Query or build Power Query, but you do kind of have to know what you're trying to accomplish in order to do it. And it's not always straightforward. And I think you can say the same for Python. So I'm tempted to just call this one maybe a draw, because I brought my tool agnostic hat to the party because I'm always wearing it. I'm a believer in using whatever tool is going to be best for the job and for the company and for the analyst, ultimately, who is doing the job, right? If it's easier for you to use Python, then Python's the winner for you in the build category. No questions asked. If it's easier for you to use Excel, then Excel is going to be the winner. That should be like not up for debate, right?
Right.
If you want to learn a new skill, by all means, go cross train and do all that. But really, the intent of this whole exercise was to show that you can do this in multiple ways using different tools, right?
Yeah.
And the end result is very similar. So it's, I mean, to each their own. But so from a build perspective, I think we're in respective disagreement, and we're biased, and we admit that, and that's okay. So
yeah, and to be fair, I think for a brand new user trying to navigate the process, it would go to Excel. I'm just a little bit of a fanboy, and I try to hold that back, but
totally didn't have to go there. But I'm gonna award Excel a quarter of a point for that rare admission on that one. So that's very kind of you. Okay, auditability. This one should not be controversial. That Jupyter notebook was beautiful. There is nothing in Power Query that I think comes close to having a clear linear thought process. Like you said, kind of natural language explanations, very easy to keep notes, have sections. I talk through how to add notes to the M code, how to do certain things, and you can clearly see the steps using the GUI, but it's not, you got to know where to go and where to look to find that stuff. It's kind of hidden behind the scenes. And that was what was really off-putting to me when I first started learning Power Query was, I don't know what's going on. I don't know how to audit this stuff. I don't even know what these steps are doing. You got to really go in and click and look and see, look at the code, look at the actions, review the before and after. Pain in the butt. So I assume that you agree. What are your thoughts on auditability here?
Yeah, I would agree. But I do think showing both sides, right? Like you can still add the comments to PowerQuery and organize your file so that there are certain things that you can do to increase auditability. So a good analyst will help that process out a ton. A bad analyst, whether they're using Python or PowerQuery, it's not going to work. But if you do it well, it'll definitely help out a ton. But I like Jupyter Notebook environment where you can create the section headings and lay everything out and then add comments. And so I think just slightly better in Python or Jupyter.
Yeah. You're trying so hard not to just slam dunk this one. I gave you the layup and you tried to like make a point for Excel a little bit, but no, I get it. I agree. That was a very kind way of putting it. But so yeah, Python takes that one clear as day. But you made a super valuable point about it's about the analyst, and a bad analyst with Python is as good as a bad analyst with Excel. It doesn't matter, right? They're going to make poor decisions. They're going to make difficult to comprehend processes. This goes with a lot of different fields. So it doesn't matter to the tool. The person using it and how they're executing it is ultimately going to be the deciding factor here. Okay. So repeatability. I'm inclined to give this one a draw. And we saw that based on you've got a source file ultimately that you're connecting to, whether you're using Python or PowerQuery. And if that source file is updated, then all you need to do is refresh and execute. And I know in PowerQuery, it takes 3 seconds to refresh. What was it in Python? How long does it take to refresh something like that?
Yeah. So you can just go in, as long as you're into your Jupyter Notebook, you just go and say run all cells and it'll run them all. So same
thing.
Seconds.
Yeah. Do you have any additional commentary on repeatability? I mean, it's kind of like one of the premier use cases for something like this, right? You're programming essentially a function to execute. That's what you're doing. So like, that's kind of the goal of both of these tools in a large way. So I don't think there's much debate here. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think they both do what they were intended to do.
Okay. Now, from an efficiency standpoint, you might argue that Python is in fact better, like just from processing, from behind the scenes, all that kind of stuff. I have zero intention of getting that nerdy at this juncture, but suffice to say that they're both solid in this regard. So 1 point to both here. So, all right. So what are we at? We're like 1.25 points for Excel and 1 point, or is it 2 points? 2 points for Python. Oh, this is getting close. The suspense is killing me. So accessibility. So we debated even including this particular thing. And the reason that I thought about not including it was that at the stage that we're at in the analytical process, we're cleaning data, right? This is a data cleaning exercise. That sort of implies that we're still holding on to it. We're not necessarily sharing it with the universe. That doesn't mean that it couldn't happen. It doesn't mean that someone might not need to tap into that file, that resource. You might get hung up and need to share it with somebody and kind of talk about what you've done or troubleshoot something, right? So there is an accessibility input. What's your take on the accessibility here?
Yeah, so I think Excel, PowerQuery takes the win on this one. With Python, if your end user isn't familiar with Python or notebooks, then it's going to be hard to share that with them. You can easily take your data frame and then convert it into an Excel file, but then it doesn't have everything packaged in Excel like it would with PowerQuery. Your data visualizations, once you get to that process, wouldn't be included in it. So
yeah, it is tricky because I think and this is going to show a little bit of my own ignorance, but can you send a Jupyter notebook to somebody and can anybody open it, or do you need to have something installed in your machine to even view it, or how does that work?
Yeah, so you'll need to either have Python installed on your machine and then know how to use Python to open it, or you would need some other software. I can't remember what it's called, and they can look up a notebook. You can also publish it online and share it that way, but that's a bunch of extra steps to try and get to where you can share it easily.
Yeah. That was actually what I was thinking as you were saying that. Was like, oh man, could you push this to GitHub or something like that if you had an online repository or somewhere you could push it to? But you're right, it's a different process to do that. It's a different type of documentation. It does make it more accessible, but again, when you think of the word accessible, it's more than just simply pushing something to someone. It's how many of those someones have access to even open it or interact with it or know what they're looking at, right? So in this regard, I think you came out the gates and kind of already handed it. You just like rolled over and gave it to Excel. I think it's a little bit closer than that, simply because, I mean, well, no, I think you're right. Now I'm trying to be nice. I'm trying to come up with excuses for why accessibility in Python might be better. It depends on the organization. That's sort of the angle. If you've got an organization and the people you're working with, that's all they're using, then the accessibility question is not an issue. Once you get beyond your group or beyond your leadership or anywhere out in the organization, that's where it becomes an issue. And that's where Excel does sort of triumph in this regard, where I could send this to anybody in the organization and more than likely they're going to be able to access it. Now, I should caveat this. I don't want to bring this up, but if you have a Mac, I do believe, unless you're running Parallels or something like that, you can't run PowerQuery on a Mac. I don't think it's currently available. I should have done my research on that before I said that, but I do think that there is some accessibility issue in that regard, but I think that's minuscule compared to the grand population, because not every company has everybody on a Mac. That's just not a thing. Unless you work where I work, and I am the only one on PC. So I do have I only know about this because it's a challenge that I do actually deal with on occasion. So I just don't typically share my files that have PowerQuery. I send sort of neutered files that have been manipulated via PowerQuery. So
yeah, and I guess the other thing to consider too is there's a price barrier to Excel, which, I mean, most people have Excel, even if they're not analysts or right.
Yeah.
Python's free, but who would have Python but not Excel? Maybe some.
Yeah. Who would?
The layperson.
Yeah. Okay. So what do we got here? We got the build. We gave it to. It was a tie, right?
We gave a little bit.
No, it was a one, or it was a quarter. It was a 25% or 0.25 points for Excel. Auditability, we gave it completely to Python. So it was 1. Repeatability, it was a 1-to-1. So it was 2 to 1.25. And then for accessibility, we're giving it to Excel. Free and clear. So It looks like this is by the slimmest of margins, Excel at 2.25 to 2. So, and I think this speaks a lot to the exercise, right? So what we're dealing with is a very small data set, a very simple, low difficulty task. And I think the more complex, the more sophisticated the task, the more dirty data, the more different types of things that you're dealing with, that could shift. Like, do you agree with that as a potential?
Yeah, I definitely think so. With all of those, right? Like the more cleaning you have to do, the setup might actually get easier in Python. And that readability, that auditability, repeatability, well, repeatability, no, but yeah. So it would shift, I think. Excel and PowerQuery. I'm not very familiar with PowerQuery, so I could be wrong. Let me know in the comments. But
oh, we're gonna get comments, I'm sure.
Good for sprinting. Yeah. Python is the good long haul, like process a lot of data, the marathon runner rather than the sprinter kind of a thing. But
got it. Yeah. And I always look to Excel. I use this analogy a lot, but it's sort of like the 3D printer of analytics, where if you've got like quick and dirty stuff that you just got to pump out, it's a good tool. It's quick, it's easy. You can manipulate stuff and ship it off and anybody can receive it. When you're dealing with production like going into production with something, there's often better tools, be that SQL or Python or R or some other dashboarding function. Like there's got to be something that's better often. Not always the case, but so anyway, that was fun. I think people are going to be very interesting to read their comments. So if you're watching this and you have very strong opinions, or even if you don't, maybe you love everything that we said and you want to sing our praises, go down in the comments, state your piece, and we would love to hear and see what you guys have to say. By the way, Bradon, where can these guys check you out? Where can they get more information on you?
Yeah, so the biggest thing I have is my YouTube channel, Chart Explorers. Otherwise, I do have a Discord server as well that you can connect with me on. I'll give the link to Matt so he can add that to his description.
Yeah, for sure. That we'll have a link down there in the description to that. And if you haven't already checked out his channel, go do that right now and subscribe, like all that good stuff. And if you're watching this and you're not subscribed to my channel and you're interested in analytics content on all things analytics careers, please consider subscribing and liking this video as well. Both of us are on LinkedIn as well. If you want to go check us out there, give us a follow. And I think that's what we wanted to cover here. So thanks for everybody for watching, and we'll see you next time.